Can a kukri stab through a bulletproof vest as seen in Far Cry? Crazy question, and the answer is probably no. I don't have a bulletproof vest, but I've been asked a fascinating question by one of my viewers. So yesterday I did a review of the magnificent Saliani kukri from K-Blades, and off the back of that I got a whole bunch of very interesting comments, and one of them is from Jan Pales, and he says, completely off topic, and I have no idea why my mind went there, but for some reason I thought of the video game Far Cry 4. Well, there's a kukri in here, so there's a pretty good reason to think of it, where the protagonist routinely runs people entirely through with a kukri, bulletproof vest and everything. Well, obviously there's lots of things in Far Cry which aren't necessarily realistic, and I'm not going to argue that any kukri is likely to make its way through a bulletproof vest. Far Cry 4 has a particular design of kukri as well. It's not, I mean, this is a 19th century style one. The one shown in Far Cry is kind of not a fantasy design, but it's a sort of tactical, modern bush knife take on a kukri. It's not a traditional kukri, but nevertheless it raises an interesting question. And he goes on to say, now the Far Cry series is known for being pretty outlandish and not giving much regard to realism. It's good games though, but how very unrealistic would you say it is to stab through a supposedly army grade bulletproof vest with a kukri? Short answer is, I think not likely, and that's what Jan thinks is as well. However, I don't own a military grade bulletproof vest, whatever that is, but an interesting thing is that blades and arrows certainly don't react against armour in the same way that bullets do, and lots of things which are designed to stop bullets will not stop a blade or an arrow. This is famously documented, although I don't think it's widely publicised. I think because, for understandable reasons, the authorities don't necessarily want people to widely know this. So crossbow bolts, for example, will go through certain types of supposedly at least pistol grade bullet resistant vests. But additionally, I know people who've worked in special effects, and bulletproof glass will not always stop arrows. It will shatter the glass sometimes, because bullets of course fragment and compress, and they are small and light. Arrows, blades react in completely different ways on the target. Now, as mentioned, I don't have a bulletproof vest, but what I do have is some sheet steel which I've used for testing pilum. Pila, plural, so the Roman throwing javelin, and I have some left over. It's 1.5mm mild steel, which is roughly equivalent to lots of armour that would have been worn in the Roman era, in the medieval era, and it might give us some information about relative penetration. So I thought, fun test to go out in the garden and do, not particularly scientific or anything like that. So we are going to test what happens when I stab 1.5mm mild steel with a kukri. I'm going to use the Windlass version of the military regimental kukri, which is the one which I think is issued to Gurkhas in the Indian Army. And I'll stick a link below to that as well in case you're interested in getting one of those. And I will also stick a link below to Todd Cutler, who made this Rondell dagger, which I'm also going to test on the steel and see what happens. So here I've rigged up in a very amateur fashion a foam archery target, which can obviously take penetration, and it has a certain amount of give to it, so it's somewhere half between being completely solid like the tree and having a bit of give in it like a body. And over it I've got 1.5mm mild steel plate, which as you can see has got some holes through it. I've used those holes to secure the plate to the target. I'm not sure that that will hold, but let's see. So we're going to give it a go. First of all, I'm going to do standard mid-torso stab, and I'm going to go first of all with the kukri. Now, safety first, kids, don't try this at home, but a few factors to bear in mind here. First of all, the kukri hilt is not particularly well adapted to stabbing at all. It is designed for chopping, so it has no hand stop. Okay. Secondly, I am wearing cut resistant gloves, partly for that reason. So I think they've got Kevlar in them, cut resistant gloves. And thirdly, I am going to put goggles on because I've got no idea if something might fly up towards my face. So let's give this a go. Like, it made a mark in the steel, and that's it. Oh, I just want to point out, look at where my hands ended up. So it's not gone beyond the cho, but certainly with gloves on, it's really difficult to keep a tight grip on this grip. I'm just going to try gingerly thrusting it without the glove on, because I can actually hold the grip much more securely without the glove. Okay, so first thing, yes, I can definitely hold it more securely with a bare hand than I can with a glove on, but I didn't do any more damage to the target at all. I would imagine I'm putting in about 60% force here. I'm not taking a step, I'm not putting everything I can in, basically because I can feel that my hand's not very secure on this grip and it will ride up onto the blade, which I don't want. I'm going to put the glove back on now. I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm actually going to hold it with two hands, and I'm going to put one hand behind the butt so my hand can't ride anywhere. So I'm using all of my body weight, but it'll probably be slower moving. It did the same amount of damage, nothing more. I should mention, incidentally, there's maybe a slight sign of glinting on the kukri, but the kukri is standing up really, really well. Let's have another conventional stab. No, nothing. Now, we need to talk about kukris and penetration for a second. So even if this was making a hole through the steel, look at the shape of this blade here. It's like a broad fat leaf, and the simple fact is that the more width and the more increasing of friction that you have behind that point, even if the point made it through the steel, you're immediately going to encounter a huge step up in the amount of friction behind the point. So even if we got the tip in, there's so much thickness. You've got a thick spine there, you've only got one cutting edge here, and there's so much sudden increase in the width of the blade that's just going to have a huge amount of resistance. Now that might not be a problem into flesh or soft things. If you're thinking about something like a barong as well, which has got a very similar shaped tip to a kukri, but when we're talking about something which has resistance to it, like clothing or body armor or steel plate or even wood, you're going to have way too much resistance to get very deep into the target. So I'll be completely honest, I expected to make a small hole in the steel with this, but I haven't made it any so far. I'm going to have a couple more stabs with this, and then I'm going to have a go with the Rondell dagger. So just to show you what this is actually doing, it's left lots of marks on the steel, but there's nothing even, slight denting on the back, there's nothing even close to getting through this at all. I'm just going to have one more try with the kukri. I'm actually going to hold it point down to see if that does anything useful at all. Obviously point down, it could be that way or that way. I think because of the angle, I might try this way. Interesting. So that actually made a slightly deeper dent. So it does seem that this is a more powerful stab. I mean, that was only one example. I'll do a couple more now. But that did feel more solid. Also, I guess the blade is in the direction of the motion as well in this case. So that did feel stronger and more solid and did make a slightly deeper dent. Huh. Well, that's really interesting. So every single time it is making deeper dents, and one of them almost looked like it might puncture through. So to me, it does seem like that is the more powerful stab. If you're going to use this as a stabbing implement, yes, of course you can reach further like that, but this is more powerful if you're trying to get through a resisting material. Let's give a go to the Rondell dagger now. So well done to that Windlass kukri. It stood up perfectly well. There's a slight tiniest bit of curling at the very tip, which I can fix in a minute, but it stood up very well. Apart from that, it appears to be good hard steel. Now we're going to look at the Todd Cutler Rondell dagger. I can't remember the exact name of this model, but it's the one with the studded grip. I've got a few of these actually, quite a few of the Todd Cutler daggers. They're very well made. This obviously is something which is designed, unlike the kukri, which is designed primarily for slashing and chopping. This is designed for piercing. However, how will it do against the steel plate? Let's have a look. So first up, to compare like with like, I'm going to hold it in the point up grip. So that's interesting from the outset. It did make a small hole through there. Okay, so right from the very beginning, it did make a hole, not enough to like injure anyone underneath, but it did a better hole. Yeah, it did just break the surface of the other side. So it did do better than the Kukri already, even though that's just the tip. Should also mention that the Rondell dagger, being a finer tip than the Kukri, has taken a very little curl. I'm not going to touch that up for now, but I might have to on subsequent stabs. So interesting, it did exactly the same thing, almost exactly the same as the last one, made the same degree of hole. So it has just broken the surface, but it's not through to any degree that's going to injure anyone. I have to say though, the slight curl on this tip has become a little bit more. What I might do now is switch around to the hammer fist grip straight away, and then I might have to sort out that tip because it's got a little bit of a bend to it now. So here we go, ice pick grip. So what's interesting about this is it's skidded. So it's gone in and then turned, and there's a very specific reason for that, and that is the tip of my dagger's curled quite badly. So I'm going to have to go off camera for a minute. I'm going to have to sort that out with a file because it is completely rolled. So let's go and fix that. Right, so tip straightened and fixed. I say that this is a little bit on the soft side, but remember this is narrower than the Kukri tip, so this has less behind it supporting it. It's a much finer point. Right, let's try hammer fist grip again. Goggles on. I'm determined to get through this thing. Remember, of course, that aside from having a blade much better suited to penetration than the Kukri is, the grip makes a huge difference. It means that I can just put more force into this, especially with gloves on, than I could do with the Kukri. So let's go again. So I've got with that one there. So you should be able to see, hopefully, I don't know if you can see light through there or not, but there is a hole. There is a hole right the way through there. Not enough to injure anyone who was on the inside of it, but nevertheless it has clearly come through the back. Not as impressive as the Pelham, but let's have another go. Right, so we got a slightly more impressive hole that time. There's that one, see if you can, that one there. Two things I changed. One, I was doing more of a downward stab rather than a sideways stab, so I was employing bigger muscle groups. But in addition, I put the edge inwards. I've got a little theory about edges shearing steel, and the amazing performance of Todd's dagger that I did on his well-known video, I think was partly due to the cross-section of the dagger. This doesn't have all of the advantages of the cross-section of that dagger, but nevertheless I thought if I put the edge inwards that might assist, and maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I have, however, we put that down for a second, I have, however, suffered yet a bit more point damage. It is a bit bent, so I am going to straighten that out again, try and make the point a little bit more robust. This time it's getting progressively more robust as I go, because it's becoming a little bit fatter because I'm losing the fine tip, which used to happen with Febb and Sykes daggers as well, incidentally. So I'm going to go inside, sort out that point, and we'll come back and have another go. Okay, tip straightened and made a little bit more robust. Let's have another go. I'm determined to get through this thing, but this isn't supposed to be a dedicated Rondell dagger versus armour video, so anyway, let's try and get it through. A couple more attempts, and then we'll maybe have one more go with the Kukri. So, small hole. Same again, small hole. The tip is standing up much better now that it's a bit more robust. So I didn't get through the plate. One more thing I think we should do, because I did this with Todd before, is to simply push the blade through if possible with this steel. So if we imagine we've come in here, so I'm not putting it into a hole or a dent or anything like that, this is a fresh piece of steel. Let's just try pushing it in. Can't do it. Can't do it on this target. Nope. And to compare like with like, I tried the same thing with the Kukri. Ow. No, it's not going to happen. So to sum up, basically the answer is that neither of these daggers got through the steel plate. However, the Rondell dagger did a lot better than the Kukri. The holes you can see that actually made a hole right the way through, although they're very small, they're all from the Rondell dagger. These sort of dimples, as they look like on here, are almost entirely from the Kukri. So there's a couple of things to think about there. Number one, the Rondell dagger's got a much slimmer blade, a profile designed for penetrating. The Kukri isn't designed for that, the Kukri's designed for chopping. Even if you enter the target, the Kukri encounters a lot more friction because it's a lot wider blade profile, and the Rondell dagger's better designed to slip in. But the one big thing, I think people always fixate on blades, the one big thing that I think you should take away from this is the difference in grip shape. The Kukri grip is, whilst you can give thrust with it on a soft target, is not designed to stab into resisting targets. It was a struggle to keep hold of it, my hand slid around, it just wasn't designed for that. The Rondell dagger, on the other hand, the hand can't go anywhere because of the rondels. It's entirely built for stabbing. So they're almost polar opposites in that regard. There are other, there are other knives and swords in the world like the Kukri, things like the Burmese Dar or the Yataghan to some extent, things like this. But the fact is that the Rondell dagger is built for stabbing. That's what it does best. The Kukri is not. So, to answer the question, can a Kukri stab through body armour, bulletproof body armour? I don't know because I don't own any, but I severely doubt that it could. Also, whether the Rondell dagger can or not, we don't know. The jury's out on that one. Now, for regular viewers of this channel and of course viewers of the Todd Workshop channel, Todd's Workshop, you will be familiar with our famous stabbing of a steel plate with a bespoke custom-made dagger made by Todd. And there is a massive disparity here between the performance, it's the same person stabbing, but different dagger, slightly different setup, and possibly a different steel plate, although I believed it was the same plate. So watch out for future content, comments and thoughts below. Why did I get such a different performance out of this particular test than I did at Todd's place? Difference of the dagger? Yes, I think there's a part there. Difference of the setup? Not so much, because we did stab horizontally for most of his tests, but we also did stab vertically as well. So not so much. I think we did a similar backing, similar kind of setup. Thirdly, difference of the plate. Well, this is an interesting thing. A lot of people questioned the steel plate that we used in Todd's tests. So we need to do more testing. I can categorically state that my plate used here is cold rolled mild steel, 1.5 millimeters thick. I've measured it myself. I mean, I ordered it as 1.5 millimeter, but I've literally measured it with my digital calipers. I can absolutely verify it is 1.5 millimeters thick, and I know it's cold rolled mild steel, and I have put holes through it with a pilum. So, what are your thoughts? Why did I get such different results with the Rondell dagger this time as opposed to when we were testing with Todd? Thoughts on a postcard or in the comments down below. But the real ultimate response is, it doesn't need to. Why would, if someone was wearing body armour, you don't aim for the body armour, you aim for where the armour isn't. Just like with the Rondell dagger is supposed to stab into gaps, into faces, into armpits, into groins, places like this. And with the Kukri chopping and cutting, it's exactly the same. The Kukri shouldn't be aiming at the body armour on the torso, it should be aiming at the face, at the neck, at the arms, at the hands, at the thighs, all of these places that are going to incapacitate an enemy without having to get through armour to get there, because they're uncovered or only covered by a thin layer of fabric. So that's what the Kukri's used for. It's not, I'm sorry to say, Far Cry 4 or any other versions of Far Cry, it's not used for stabbing through body armour. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope I'll see you back on the channel really soon. Give us a like, and I will be Matt Easton again when you see me here on this channel, Schola Gladiatoria. Cheers, folks.
Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.